He doesn't remember his own name anymore, but somewhere in the cold dark, a dog still does. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? The night settles heavy over the edge of a quiet Australian suburb, the kind of place where the streetlights hum low and steady, casting long amber pools across cracked pavement that hasn't felt new in years, and the air carries that faint mix of damp concrete and eucalyptus drifting in from somewhere beyond the houses, soft but persistent like memory that refuses to leave. And under one of those flickering lights, just past a rusted bus stop sign leaning slightly off-center, a man sits curled into himself, shoulders hunched against a chill that bites deeper than temperature, wrapped in a worn jacket that once might have been military green, but now holds the color of dust and time. His boots scuffed, soles thinning, laces uneven, and his hands, rough, weathered, tremble not from fear, not exactly, but from something quieter, something hollow, as if the world has slowly taken pieces of him and forgotten to give them back. And his eyes, pale and distant, scan nothing in particular, like a man searching for something he cannot name, because the truth is, he doesn't remember it anymore. Not clearly, not the way he should, not the way a man ought to remember who he is. And yet every now and then, something flickers behind those eyes, something unfinished, like a half-heard command carried on the wind, and he shifts, dragging his heel along the bitumen, listening to the faint scrape echo in the stillness, grounding himself in the only way he knows how, through sound, through repetition, through the quiet rhythm of survival. And across the road, just beyond the reach of that same light, there's movement, subtle at first, almost mistaken for shadow, but it lingers, breath visible in the cool air, steady, measured, alive, a shape that doesn't quite belong to the silence. And then the ears catch the light, sharp and upright, followed by a pair of eyes, amber, watching, not with fear, not with hunger, but with something deeper, something patient. And the dog stands there, still as if carved from the night itself, a German shepherd, with a coat dulled by dust yet still carrying that quiet strength beneath, ribs just faintly outlined but posture unbroken, alert, waiting, as though this moment has been building for longer than either of them can understand. And the wind shifts, carrying scent across the empty street, invisible, undeniable, and the dog's chest rises just a little faster, a tremor passing through muscle and memory alike, because there is something in that scent, something buried, something old, something that once meant everything. And yet the man doesn't look up, not at first, his gaze fixed on the ground as if answers might be written there in cracks and stains, and he mutters under his breath, a sound too quiet to carry, a fragment of language that once held structure, discipline, purpose, now broken into pieces that no longer quite fit. And the dog takes a step forward, then stops, hesitation anchoring him to the edge of certainty. Because instinct is strong, but time is stronger, and 2 years is enough to blur even the sharpest bond, enough to turn certainty into doubt. And still, he watches, unmoving, refusing to leave, because somewhere beyond hunger, beyond training, beyond the endless noise of the world, there is a thread that hasn't snapped, a connection stretched thin but not broken. And the streetlight flickers once, twice, casting brief shadows that dance across the man's face, revealing for just a second the faint outline of ink along his right forearm, a tattoo worn but unmistakable in its shape. A dog, etched into skin like a promise that once meant something sacred. And the shepherd's ears twitch, his body leaning forward almost imperceptibly, as if pulled by that silent echo. And the night holds its breath, suspended between what was lost and what might still be found. And for the first time, the man lifts his head, just slightly, eyes drifting toward the movement he cannot yet place, unaware that the past he's forgotten is already standing right in front of him, waiting to be remembered. The wind drifts low along the pavement, carrying the quiet rustle of dry leaves skittering across the curb, and the man shifts again, slower this time, as though the effort itself costs him something unseen, his breath fogging faintly in the cool air while he presses his palms together, rubbing warmth into skin that has forgotten comfort. And for a moment he just listens to the distant hum of a passing Uda somewhere far down the road, to the soft metallic clink of the bus stop sign tapping lightly against its loose bolts, to the silence in between that seems louder than anything else. And then there is another sound, softer, deliberate, a step on bitumen, followed by another, measured, careful, and his head tilts slightly, not fully alert, not yet, but something inside him stirs, something old, something that does not need a name to exist, and across the narrow stretch of road the dog begins to move, closing the distance one cautious step at a time, muscles held tight beneath his coat, eyes fixed not with aggression, but with a searching intensity that feels almost human, and he pauses halfway, testing the air again, as if confirming what his instincts already whisper, and the man finally looks up properly, his gaze unfocused at first, drifting past the shape before settling slowly, uncertainly, on the figure standing there, and there is no recognition in his face, not yet, only confusion, a faint crease forming between his brows as if trying to solve a puzzle missing too many pieces, and he lets out a breath, long and uneven, before muttering something under his breath, words that come out fragmented, broken by time and distance. And he shifts his weight, dragging himself a little further back against the cold metal bench behind him, instinctively creating space, not out of fear exactly, but out of habit, because the world has taught him to expect nothing and trust even less. And the dog stops again, just beyond arm's reach now, close enough for the details to sharpen, the faint dust clinging to his fur, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the small scar just above his left eye barely visible under the dim light, and he lowers his head slightly, not submissive, not dominant, simply present, waiting, and his tail does not wag, not yet, it remains still, controlled, as though even hope must be measured carefully. And the man watches him, eyes narrowing just a fraction, trying to place the feeling that creeps in quietly beneath the surface of his confusion, something familiar but distant, like hearing a song you used to know by heart, but can no longer recall the words to, and his hand lifts unconsciously, hovering in the air for a moment before hesitating, fingers curling slightly, as if unsure what they are meant to do, and the dog's ears flick forward at that movement, his body leaning just a touch closer, drawn by that small, almost forgotten gesture, and the space between them holds a fragile tension, not dangerous, not hostile, but uncertain, stretched thin between memory and loss. And then the man exhales again, sharper this time, and lowers his hand, shaking his head faintly, as if dismissing the moment entirely. And he looks away, breaking the connection before it can form, because something in him resists it, something that has learned the cost of remembering. And he mutters again, louder now, a single word slipping out without meaning to, a word shaped by habit more than thought. Move, he says, not harsh, not commanding, just tired, and the dog freezes at the sound, every muscle tightening for a fraction of a second, as if struck by something unseen, because that word, that tone, carries an echo, faint but undeniable, and his ears twitch again, sharper this time, his eyes locking onto the man with renewed intensity. And he does not move away, not even a step. Instead, he stays exactly where he is, absorbing the sound, holding it, as though trying to fit it back into a memory that refuses to stay buried. And the man shifts again, pulling his jacket tighter around himself, unaware of what he has just triggered, unaware that a single word has traveled further than 2 years ever could. And he glances back briefly, irritation flickering across his face, not directed at the dog, but at the world itself, at the cold, at the noise in his head that never quite settles, and he gestures vaguely with his hand, weaker this time, repeating the word again, move along, and the dog takes a single step, but not away, closer, slow and deliberate, closing that final gap inch by inch, and now they are close enough that the man can hear the soft rhythm of the dog's breathing, steady, grounding, and something about that sound catches him off guard, because it feels familiar in a way he cannot explain, and his eyes flicker again, uncertainty deepening, and he leans forward slightly despite himself, drawn in by something he cannot name, and for a brief moment the world narrows to just the two of them, the streetlight above, the quiet road, the faint scent of eucalyptus in the air, and the dog lifts his head just enough to meet the man's gaze fully, amber eyes steady, searching, holding on to something the man has already lost, and in that silence, something shifts, subtle but real, like the first crack in a wall that has stood too long, and the man's breath catches, just for a second, as if his body remembers before his mind does, and his hand lifts again, slower this time, trembling slightly as it reaches out, hovering just above the dog's head, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him, but not quite touching, not yet, and the dog does not move, does not flinch, he simply waits, because he has waited longer than this, and he can wait a little more. The space between his hand and the dog's head lingers, fragile as breath on cold air, and for a moment nothing moves, not the wind, not the leaves, not even the faint hum of the streetlight above, as if the world itself has chosen to wait, and the man's fingers hover there, trembling just enough to betray something deeper than uncertainty, something closer to fear, because touching means remembering, and remembering means facing whatever it was that broke him in the first place, and his eyes narrow again, searching the dog's face for meaning, for explanation, for anything that could justify the strange pull in his chest, but all he finds is stillness, a quiet patience that does not demand, does not rush, only exists, steady and unwavering, and the dog breathes in slowly, drawing the man's scent into himself like a thread he refuses to lose again. And there it is, beneath the dust and time, beneath the layers of street and rain and survival, something familiar, something that once meant home, and his tail shifts, just slightly, a movement so small it might go unnoticed by anyone else, but it carries weight, it carries memory, and the man's hand drops suddenly, retreating as if the moment burned him, and he exhales sharply, shaking his head as though trying to clear something that will not leave, and he mutters again, this time more to himself than anything else, words that stumble over one another, fragments of thought that never quite form into sense, and he leans forward, elbows resting on his knees, staring down at the ground as if the answers might be hiding in the cracks of the pavement, and the dog does not follow the retreat, does not press closer. Instead, he lowers himself slowly onto the cold bitumen, lying just a short distance away, close enough to stay connected, far enough to respect the space that has been carved by time, and he watches, ears flicking at every small movement, every shift in breath, as though listening not just to the man, but to something beneath him, something deeper, and minutes pass, quiet and heavy, marked only by the occasional gust of wind and the distant sound of tires rolling somewhere beyond the edge of the night, and the man reaches into his pocket, pulling out a small piece of bread wrapped loosely in paper, worn thin and slightly crumpled, and he stares at it for a moment before breaking it in half with slow, deliberate hands, and without looking up, he tosses a piece gently toward the dog, not as an offering of trust, but as a habit, a reflex learned from a life where sharing was simpler than thinking, and the bread lands softly on the ground between them, and the dog looks at it, then back at the man, and he does not move to eat it, not yet, because this is not what he came for. This is not what he has been searching for across kilometers of unfamiliar streets and shifting scents, and instead he remains still, holding his place, his gaze steady, as if waiting for something more important than hunger, and the man glances up again, noticing this time a flicker of confusion crossing his face as he studies the dog more closely, trying to understand why it does not behave like the others he has known, why it does not grab and run, why it does not flinch or bark or demand. And something about that stillness unsettles him, not in a threatening way, but in a way that feels too close, too personal, and he shifts again, running a hand through his hair, fingers catching on strands that have grown uneven and unkempt, and his gaze drifts to the dog's eyes once more, amber catching the light in a way that feels almost deliberate, almost knowing, and he leans back slightly, drawing a slow breath as if steadying himself against something he cannot name, and then, without thinking, without planning, his voice softens, just a fraction, losing its edge, losing the defensive tone that has wrapped itself around him for so long. And he speaks again, quieter now. "You should not be here," he says, the words carrying a strange weight, as though meant for more than just the moment, and the dog's ears lift at the sound, not because of the words themselves, but because of the tone, the rhythm, the faint echo of something once familiar, and his tail moves again, A little more this time, restrained but undeniable, and he shifts forward slightly, closing the gap by just a few centimeters, careful, measured, never breaking the fragile line that connects them. And the man watches this, his breath slowing, his eyes searching, and for a second, just a second, something breaks through, a flicker of recognition that does not yet have a name, but feels like the beginning of one, and his hand lifts again, slower, steadier this time, and he hesitates only briefly before letting his fingers finally make contact, brushing lightly against the dog's fur. And the moment it happens, something inside him shifts, subtle but undeniable, like a door opening just enough to let light through, and the dog exhales, long and quiet, leaning ever so slightly into the touch, not pushing, not demanding, simply accepting, as if this was always meant to happen, as if 2 years had only been a pause, not an ending, and the man's fingers linger there, moving gently now, almost without thought, tracing the line of the dog's head, and his brow furrows, confusion deepening into something else, something closer to memory, and he whispers, barely audible, "I know you," though he does not yet understand how. The words hang in the air between them, soft and uncertain, and the man does not seem to realize he has spoken them, not fully, as if they slipped out from somewhere deeper than thought, and his hand remains resting against the dog's head, fingers barely moving now, just enough to feel the warmth beneath the fur, and that warmth does something to him, something quiet but persistent, like sunlight reaching a place that has been cold for far too long. And he swallows slowly, his throat tight, his gaze locked onto the dog's eyes as if searching for confirmation, for permission, for something that tells him he is not imagining this. And the dog holds that gaze without hesitation, steady and unwavering, as though he has been waiting for this exact moment, this exact word, for 2 long years measured not in days but in absence. And his tail moves again, a little stronger now, brushing softly against the pavement with a faint rhythm that feels almost like a heartbeat, and the man's brow tightens, confusion giving way to something heavier, something that presses against his chest with quiet insistence. And he draws in a breath, deeper this time, as if bracing himself, and then he speaks again, voice lower, rough with disuse. "Where did you come from?" he murmurs, though the question carries no real expectation of an answer, and the dog shifts closer by a few centimeters, careful, deliberate, closing the distance until his shoulder nearly touches the man's knee, and still he does not demand, does not push, he simply exists there, present in a way that feels impossible to ignore, and the man's hand moves again, this time more naturally, fingers threading lightly through the fur along the dog's neck, and something about the motion feels practiced, familiar in a way that does not match the emptiness in his mind. And he pauses, hands stilling, and his eyes flicker, as if something inside him has just misaligned, as if the body remembers something the mind has lost, and a faint crease forms between his brows as he studies the dog more closely, noticing details he had not seen before, the way the ears remain alert but calm, the steady posture, the controlled breathing, the quiet discipline that sits beneath every movement. And it stirs something, a distant echo of structure, of routine, of a life that once held order instead of this endless drift. And he leans forward slightly, his face closer now, searching, and his voice drops to a whisper, almost afraid of what it might uncover. "Have I seen you before?" he says. And the words linger, fragile and unfinished, and the dog's ears lift higher. At the sound, his body tensing just enough to betray the significance of the moment, and his tail moves again, slower now, measured, as if he understands that too much too soon might break something delicate, and the man exhales, a long, shaky breath, and his hand slides down to the side of the dog's neck, fingers brushing against something firm beneath the fur, and he pauses, his fingertips tracing along the edge of it, and there, just barely visible in the dim light, is a worn collar, faded and scratched by time, and attached to it, a small metal tag catches the glow of the streetlight, reflecting a dull, softened shine, and the man's eyes narrow, focus sharpening as he leans closer, bringing the tag into view, and his fingers close gently around it, lifting it just enough to read, and the moment stretches, suspended between what is known and what is about to be remembered, and his lips part slightly as he tries to make sense of the letters etched into the metal, worn but still legible, and he breathes the name out slowly, as if tasting it for the first time. Ranger, he says, the word unfamiliar and yet deeply known all at once. And the instant it leaves his lips, the dog reacts. Not with sudden movement, not with noise, but with something quieter, something deeper, his entire body softening as if a weight has been lifted, as if a door long closed has finally opened. And his tail begins to move more freely now, brushing against the ground with a steady, hopeful rhythm. And the man freezes, the name lingering in his mind, echoing in a place that has been silent for too long. And his hand tightens slightly around the tag, and something shifts behind his eyes, something fragile but real. And he blinks, once, twice, as if trying to clear his vision, and for a fleeting second, the world around him flickers, not visibly, not to anyone else, but inside, where fragments begin to stir, images without context, sensations without explanation, the feeling of movement, of purpose, of standing beside something that mattered. And his breath catches, sharp and unexpected, and he pulls his hand back slightly, as if startled by what he is beginning to feel, and he shakes his head, trying to push it away, because it is too much, too sudden, too close to something he has spent so long avoiding without even knowing why. And yet the name remains, repeating quietly in his mind, Ranger. And he looks at the dog again, really looks this time, and the pieces do not fit yet, not completely, but they are no longer entirely separate either. And he whispers again, softer now, almost pleading, Ranger. And the dog leans in just a fraction closer, pressing his head gently against the man's hand. A simple gesture, but one filled with certainty, with recognition that does not need explanation. And the man's shoulders drop slightly, tension easing just enough to let something through, and he closes his eyes for a brief moment, breathing in the scent of the dog, a mix of dust and warmth and something else, something that feels like home. And when he opens them again, there is a change, small but undeniable, a flicker of something new, or perhaps something very old, returning, and he does not understand it yet, not fully, but for the first time in a long while, he does not pull away. The name does not fade this time. It lingers, settling into the quiet space inside his chest like something that has been searching for a place to land. And the man sits very still, his hand resting against Ranger's neck, fingers curled slightly into the fur, as if holding on to something that might slip away if he lets go. And his breathing changes, slower now, deeper, each inhale carrying more than just air, carrying weight, memory, something unnamed but undeniable. And he stares at the dog with a new kind of focus, not just confusion anymore, but recognition trying to take shape. And his lips part again, but no sound comes at first, because whatever is rising inside him does not yet know how to be spoken. And Ranger remains pressed gently against him, steady and grounded, his presence calm, patient, as though he understands that this moment cannot be rushed, that whatever has been broken must come back together piece by piece. And the night feels different now, less empty, less distant, as if something has shifted just enough to let warmth return. And the man swallows, his throat tightening as he looks down at his own hand resting against the dog, noticing the way his fingers move instinctively, tracing along the same line again and again, a motion too familiar to be accidental. And his brow furrows deeper, and then his gaze drops to his right arm, where the sleeve of his worn jacket has fallen back just enough to reveal the edge of ink beneath, faded but still clear in its shape. And he stares at it, as if seeing it properly for the first time, the outline of a dog etched into his skin, simple but precise. And something about that image pulls at him harder than anything else has so far, because it matches, not perfectly, but close enough to matter. And his hand lifts slowly, leaving Ranger's fur for just a moment as his fingers brush against the tattoo, tracing its lines with a kind of quiet disbelief. And his breathing catches again, sharper this time, and his eyes flick back to Ranger, then down to the ink, then back again, as if trying to connect the two across a gap that still feels too wide. And his voice comes out barely above a whisper, fragile, uncertain. You are him, he says, not as a statement, but as a question he is almost afraid to answer. And Ranger's ears lift slightly at the sound, his tail moving with a little more confidence now, brushing steadily against the ground, and he leans his head forward again, pressing gently into the man's hand as it returns to him, as if confirming what words cannot yet fully hold. And the man exhales slowly, his shoulders dropping further, tension loosening in a way that feels unfamiliar but right. And he shakes his head faintly, not in denial, but in disbelief, as if he cannot quite accept that something this real could still exist after everything else has fallen away. And he looks around briefly, as though expecting someone else to explain it, someone to step in and tell him what this means. But the street remains empty, the world unchanged, leaving only the two of them in this quiet moment. And his gaze returns to Ranger, softer now, less guarded, and he leans forward slightly, bringing his forehead closer to the dog's, not quite touching, but close enough to feel the shared warmth between them. And his eyes close for a brief second, and in that darkness, something flickers again, stronger this time. Not clear, not complete, but present, the sense of standing beside this dog somewhere else, in a different time, moving together with purpose, with trust, with something that went beyond words. And his breath stutters, and his eyes open quickly, as if startled by the feeling. And he pulls back just enough to look at Ranger again, searching, and his voice trembles slightly as he speaks. I had you, he says, the words forming slowly, each one heavy with meaning he is only beginning to understand. And Ranger remains steady, unwavering, his gaze locked onto the man as if willing him to keep going, to follow that fragile thread wherever it leads. And the man nods faintly, more to himself than anything else, and his hand moves again, this time more confidently, stroking along Ranger's neck and down his back. The motion smoother now, more natural, and something about it unlocks another small piece, another fragment, the feeling of routine, of repetition, of doing this same motion countless times before. And he lets out a quiet breath that almost sounds like a laugh, though there is no humor in it, only relief, only the faintest hint of something returning. And he whispers again, softer now, Ranger. And this time the name does not feel foreign, it settles more easily, more naturally. And Ranger's tail responds, wagging a little faster, the rhythm steady and certain. And the man's eyes begin to shine, not with tears exactly, but with something close, something held back for so long it no longer knows how to fall. And he shakes his head again, a small, almost disbelieving smile flickering at the corner of his mouth. And he exhales slowly, the sound carrying a weight that feels like release. And for the first time since the night began, he does not look lost, not entirely. There is still confusion, still gaps, still pieces missing. But there is also something else now, something grounding, something that anchors him in a way nothing else has managed to do. And he reaches out with his other hand, bringing both hands to rest against Ranger's shoulders, holding him there gently but firmly, as if making sure he is real, as if confirming that this is not something that will disappear the moment he looks away. And Ranger leans into the touch without hesitation, his body relaxed but present, offering everything without asking for anything in return. And the man breathes in deeply again, the scent of the dog filling his senses. And this time it does not feel strange, it feels right. It feels like something that belongs. And he closes his eyes once more, not out of confusion, but out of something quieter, something steadier. And when he opens them again, he does not pull back. He stays, holding on to this moment as if it might be the beginning of something he thought was gone forever. The warmth lingers longer this time, not just in his hands but somewhere deeper, somewhere that has been untouched for far too long. And the man stays there, both hands resting against Ranger's shoulders, fingers pressing slightly into the thick fur as if anchoring himself to something real, something solid. And he exhales slowly, the breath leaving him with a weight that feels almost like relief. And for a moment, he simply looks at the dog, not searching now, not questioning, just seeing, truly seeing. And Ranger meets that gaze without hesitation, calm and certain, as if this moment has already been decided long before either of them arrived here. And the streetlight above hums faintly, casting a soft amber glow that settles over them both, turning the cold pavement into something almost gentle, almost forgiving. And the man shifts slightly, adjusting his position on the bench, but this time he does not pull away. He does not retreat back into himself. Instead, he leans forward just enough to stay close, his knees nearly touching Ranger's chest, and his voice comes again, low and rough but steadier now. "How did you find me?" he murmurs, though there is no expectation in it, only quiet wonder, and Ranger's ears flick at the sound, his head tilting just slightly, not in confusion but in recognition of the tone, and his tail moves again, slow and deliberate, brushing the ground with a rhythm that feels almost like reassurance, and the man watches that movement, something softening further in his expression, and he lets out a faint breath that almost turns into a small, disbelieving laugh, the sound unfamiliar but not unwelcome, and he shakes his head lightly, eyes dropping for a moment as if overwhelmed by the weight of it all, and when he looks back up, there is a shift, subtle but undeniable, a trace of something steadier, something that resembles the man he might have once been, and his hand moves again, sliding along Ranger's back in a slow, absent motion, and this time it is not searching, not testing, it is remembering, even if only in fragments, even if the full picture still lies just out of reach, and the dog responds in kind, leaning slightly into the touch, grounding him without demanding anything more, and the silence between them feels different now, no longer empty, no longer hollow, but filled with something quiet and shared, something that does not need to be spoken to be understood, and a breeze passes through the street, carrying with it the faint scent of gum trees and distant earth, and the man inhales deeply, his chest rising and falling with a steadier rhythm, and his gaze drifts upward briefly, taking in the dim sky above, the faint outline of clouds moving slowly across it. And for a moment, he simply exists there, present, not lost, not drifting, just here. And then his eyes return to Ranger, and something in them holds a question he has not yet found the words for, and his lips part again, but this time the words come slower, more deliberate. "Did I leave you?" he asks, the sentence fragile, almost afraid of its own meaning, and Ranger remains still, his gaze unwavering, offering no judgment, no blame, only presence, and the man swallows, his throat tightening slightly, and he nods faintly to himself, as if accepting something he cannot fully remember, and his shoulders rise and fall with a deeper breath, and he reaches down again, his hand finding Ranger's collar once more, fingers brushing lightly over the worn tag, tracing the edges as if grounding himself in its reality, and the metal catches the light again, reflecting a soft glimmer that feels almost symbolic, something small but enduring, and he stares at it for a moment longer before releasing it, his hand returning to rest against the dog's neck, and this time the touch is firmer, more certain, and Ranger leans into it fully now, closing the last of the distance between them, his body pressing gently against the man's leg, and the contact is simple, quiet, but it carries weight, it carries meaning, and the man does not pull away, instead he shifts slightly to accommodate it, his posture opening just enough to allow it, and his hand moves instinctively to rest along Ranger's shoulder, fingers curling slightly, as if holding on to something that matters, and his breathing steadies further, each inhale deeper, each exhale slower, and there is a calm that settles over him now, not complete, not perfect, but present, and he closes his eyes briefly, just for a second, and in that second something else stirs, not a full memory, not yet, but a feeling, a sense of standing beside this dog somewhere else, somewhere that mattered, somewhere that shaped him in ways he cannot yet articulate, and his eyes open again, and this time there is less confusion in them, less distance, and more of something else, something that looks almost like recognition, even if it is still incomplete, and he studies Ranger's face again, more closely now, noticing the small details he missed before, the faint scar above the eye, the steady focus, the quiet discipline that sits beneath every movement, and it resonates with something inside him, something structured, something trained, and he lets out another breath, softer this time, and his lips move again, forming the name once more. Ranger. And this time it carries weight. It carries ownership, not in the sense of possession, but in the sense of belonging, and Ranger's tail responds immediately, wagging with more certainty now, the movement no longer restrained, and the man watches it, a faint smile forming again, fragile but real, and he shakes his head lightly, as if still trying to understand how something so simple can feel so significant, and he leans forward just a little more, bringing his forehead closer to Ranger's once again, and this time he does not hesitate. He lets it rest there, gently, a quiet point of contact that says more than words ever could. And he closes his eyes, not in confusion now, but in something closer to acceptance, and the night continues around them, unchanged and indifferent. But for the first time, he is not alone within it. The contact lingers, forehead against fur, breath shared in the quiet space between them. And for a moment the world narrows to something simple, something almost forgotten, and the man stays there longer than he expects, longer than he usually allows himself to remain anywhere, because stillness has never felt safe before, but now it does, or at least it does not feel dangerous, and that alone is enough to keep him from pulling away. And Ranger remains steady beneath him, unmoving except for the slow rise and fall of his breathing, a rhythm that feels grounding, like something solid in a life that has long since lost its structure. And the man exhales slowly, his shoulders easing further, and when he finally lifts his head, the movement is unhurried, as though he is not afraid of losing what he has found, and his eyes open with a softness that was not there before, a quiet awareness settling in, and he studies Ranger again. But this time not as a stranger, not as a question, but as something known, something that belongs in the space beside him. And his hand moves almost automatically, resting along the dog's neck, fingers pressing gently into the fur with a familiarity that feels less like discovery and more like return. And he draws in another breath, deeper this time, and the air feels different, less heavy, less hollow, and he glances down at the pavement briefly, then back at Ranger, and something in his expression shifts again, a trace of something steadier, something closer to intent, and his voice comes quietly, but clearer now. "Stay," he says, the words slipping out with a tone that carries more weight than before, not forceful, not commanding, but certain, and Ranger responds immediately, not by freezing, not by reacting sharply, but by settling more firmly into place, his posture aligning with the word as if it has always belonged there. And the man notices this, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in confusion this time, but in recognition of the response itself, and he tilts his head just a fraction, watching the dog with a new kind of focus, and he repeats the word, softer now, almost testing it, "Stay." And Ranger does not move, his gaze fixed, his body calm. And something about that steadiness pulls another thread loose inside the man's mind, something structured, something built on repetition and trust. And his breath catches again, not sharply this time, but with a quiet realization, and he nods faintly to himself, as if confirming something he cannot yet fully articulate, and his hand slides down along Ranger's shoulder, fingers tracing the line of muscle beneath the coat, and the motion feels practiced, deliberate, as though it belongs to a pattern he once knew well. And he shifts slightly on the bench, straightening just a little, his posture unconsciously aligning, his shoulders pulling back, his spine lengthening, and the change is subtle, but it is there, a faint echo of discipline returning, and he notices it too, the way his body responds without instruction, and he exhales slowly, a quiet sound that carries both surprise and something close to relief, and he glances around again, not searching this time, but taking in the space with clearer eyes, the dim streetlight, the empty road stretching out in both directions, the faint outline of houses sitting silent beyond the verge, and it all feels less distant now, less like something he is disconnected from, and his gaze returns to Ranger, and he studies him again, more closely now, noticing the details with sharper clarity, the way the ears remain alert but relaxed, the steady focus in the eyes, the quiet readiness in the posture, and it resonates with something deeper, something ingrained, and he leans forward slightly, bringing his hand up again to rest against the side of Ranger's face, fingers brushing lightly along the jawline, and he pauses there, his touch steady, and his voice comes again, softer but more certain. "Good boy," he murmurs, the words carrying a tone that feels instinctive, natural, and Ranger's tail responds at once, wagging with a quiet rhythm that feels almost like affirmation, and the man's lips part slightly, a faint breath escaping him as he absorbs the response, and he nods again, slower this time, as if something is falling into place, piece by piece, and he repeats it, just under his breath, "Good boy." And this time the words settle more easily, as though they have always belonged there. And Ranger leans into the touch again, pressing gently against the man's hand, and the contact feels grounding, real, and the man closes his eyes briefly, not in confusion, but in concentration, as if trying to follow the thread further, to see where it leads. And in that quiet moment, something else surfaces, not an image, not a full memory, but a sensation, the feeling of standing, of moving with purpose, of having this dog beside him, not here, not on this street, but somewhere else, somewhere that mattered. And his breath deepens again, and when he opens his eyes, there is a shift, small but undeniable, a flicker of something stronger, something closer to understanding. And he looks at Ranger again, really looks, and his voice comes once more, steady now, grounded. "You stayed," he says, the words carrying a quiet weight, and Ranger's gaze does not waver, his presence unwavering, and the man's expression softens further, something in his eyes loosening, something guarded beginning to fall away. And he reaches forward again, this time without hesitation, wrapping one arm gently around Ranger's neck, pulling him closer, and Ranger accepts it fully, leaning into the contact without resistance, and the man holds him there, not tightly, not desperately, but with a quiet certainty, as if he has found something he did not realize he was missing. And for the first time in a long while, his breathing is steady, his posture grounded, and the night no longer feels empty, because there is something beside him now that does not drift, does not fade, something that remains. The hold does not break, not immediately, and the man keeps his arm loosely around Ranger's neck, not restraining, not claiming, just resting there, as if the weight of the dog's presence is enough to keep him steady. And for a while neither of them moves, the quiet stretching out across the empty street like something sacred, untouched, and the faint hum of the streetlight above blends with the slow rhythm of Ranger's breathing, creating a kind of stillness that feels almost intentional, as if the world has chosen to soften just for them. And the man exhales again, longer this time, and when he finally eases his arm back, it is not because he wants to let go, but because something inside him is beginning to shift, something asking for more than just stillness, something asking for movement, for direction, and he leans back slightly on the bench, his hand still resting against Ranger's shoulder, fingers absent-mindedly brushing through the fur, as if keeping contact is no longer a question, and his gaze drifts down the road, following the faint white line painted along the edge of the bitumen, stretching into the distance under the dim lights. And there is a quiet moment where he seems to be thinking, not in fragments this time, not in scattered thoughts, but in something slower, more connected, and he tilts his head slightly, his brow tightening just a fraction as if trying to organize something inside his mind. And Ranger watches him closely, ears flicking at every subtle shift, his body still grounded but ready, as if sensing that something is about to change. And the man inhales deeply, the air cool against his chest, and he presses his palms briefly against his knees before pushing himself up, the movement unsteady at first, his balance uncertain from long hours spent sitting, but he steadies himself quickly, his legs adjusting, remembering something about standing, about holding weight, and Ranger rises at the same time, smooth and immediate, aligning himself beside the man without needing instruction, his shoulder near the man's thigh, close but not touching, a position that feels practiced, instinctive, and the man glances down at him, noticing the placement, the alignment, and something in his expression sharpens again, a flicker of recognition passing through, and he shifts his weight slightly, testing his stance, and Ranger adjusts with him, matching the movement without hesitation, and the man's breath catches softly, not in shock, but in quiet understanding, and he looks down the road again, then back at Ranger, and his voice comes, low but steady. "Walk," he says, the word forming with a tone that carries more certainty than before, and Ranger responds immediately, stepping forward in sync with him, not ahead, not behind, but beside. And the man takes a step, then another, his boots scraping lightly against the pavement, and there is a brief moment of hesitation, a flicker of doubt, as if he expects the connection to break, as if he expects the dog to drift away like everything else has. But Ranger stays, his pace matched, his presence constant, and the man continues, his steps becoming more even, more deliberate, and something about the rhythm begins to settle into him. the simple act of moving forward with purpose. Even if that purpose is not yet fully understood and the road stretches ahead, quiet and empty, the faint glow of streetlights marking the way, and the man's posture straightens slightly as he walks, his shoulders pulling back, his head lifting just a little higher, and Ranger remains beside him, steady, unwavering, and the silence between them is no longer empty. It is filled with something shared, something understood without words, and the man glances down again, watching the dog's movement, the controlled gait, the quiet discipline in every step, and it triggers something else, another fragment, not a full memory, but a feeling of moving like this before, of walking side by side with intent, with awareness, and his breath deepens, and he nods faintly to himself, as if accepting the connection, and they continue down the street, passing the bus stop, the leaning sign now behind them, and the world begins to feel less distant, less disconnected, and the man slows slightly, his gaze catching on a small reflection in a shop window ahead, dark glass catching the faint outline of movement, and as they pass, he glances at it, seeing for the first time in a long while not just a blurred shape, but a figure, himself, standing straighter than before, with a dog beside him, and he pauses for just a second, looking at that reflection, and something about it feels unfamiliar, but not wrong, and he exhales softly, a quiet breath that carries a hint of something new, and he turns his gaze forward again, continuing to walk, and Ranger stays beside him, unwavering, and the night moves with them, no longer something that surrounds him, but something he moves through, and for the first time in a long while, there is direction, even if it is only one step at a time, even if it is only as far as the next streetlight, and that is enough, because he is no longer drifting, he is moving, and he is not alone. They keep moving, step after step, the quiet rhythm of boots on pavement blending with the soft, measured gait of Paws beside him, and the man does not rush it, does not question it. He simply follows the motion, letting it carry him forward as though the act of walking itself is rebuilding something inside him piece by piece. And the street stretches on under dim amber lights spaced roughly 20 meters apart, each one casting a pool of glow that they pass through like markers of time, like silent checkpoints guiding them forward. And Ranger stays aligned perfectly at his side, shoulder level with the man's thigh, never drifting, never pulling ahead, his presence steady in a way that feels deliberate, practiced, and the man notices it more clearly now, the discipline in every step, the quiet control, and it stirs something deeper, something that feels structured, something that once had purpose. And his posture adjusts again without thought, his shoulders settling into a more upright position, his stride evening out, longer, more balanced, and he exhales softly as he realizes it, not startled this time, but aware that his body is remembering things his mind still struggles to hold. And he glances down at Ranger, studying the dog's movement, the way each step lands with precision, the way his head stays level, eyes forward but alert, and it feels familiar, not just in recognition, but in expectation, as if this is how it has always been meant to be. And the man's lips part slightly, a quiet breath escaping him, and he nods faintly to himself, and then he speaks again, almost without thinking. Heel, he says, the word coming out more naturally than anything before it, and Ranger adjusts immediately, tightening his position by a few centimeters, his shoulder brushing lightly against the man's leg in perfect alignment, and the man stops mid-step, just for a moment, his breath catching not from surprise, but from the clarity of it, and he looks down again, watching the response, and something shifts inside him, stronger this time, not just a flicker, but a thread pulling tighter, and he takes another step forward, slower, deliberate, testing it, and Ranger moves in sync, flawless, and the man exhales again, longer, and a faint shake of his head follows, not in disbelief, but in quiet acknowledgement, and they continue, moving through the next stretch of road where a small corner shop sits dark behind a metal shutter, graffiti faintly visible along its side, and the man's gaze drifts briefly across it before returning forward, and there is a subtle change in his eyes now, less lost, less distant, more present, and he reaches down without breaking stride, his hand brushing lightly against Ranger's back, a brief touch, almost instinctive, and the dog leans into it just enough to respond, never breaking pace, and the man's breath steadies further, each inhale deeper, each exhale more controlled, and he begins to notice the world again, not just as something he exists within, but as something he moves through. The faint rustle of trees beyond the curb, the distant hum of a car passing somewhere out of sight, the cool night air brushing against his face, and it all feels sharper, clearer, as though something inside him is waking up slowly. And they reach another streetlight, and the man slows slightly, his steps becoming more measured, and he glances down again at Ranger, and his voice comes, quieter now, but steady, "Good boy." And this time the words carry confidence, not hesitation, and Ranger's tail responds with a soft, controlled wag, and the man nods faintly, as if confirming something within himself, and then he stops, not abruptly, but with intention, his feet coming to rest just at the edge of. The lights glow, and Ranger stops with him instantly, posture steady, gaze forward, waiting, and the man stands there for a moment, breathing, feeling the stillness settle around them again. But it is not the same stillness as before. It is not empty, not hollow. It is full, grounded, and he looks down at his hands, flexing his fingers slowly as if testing their strength, their reality, and then his gaze lifts, scanning the quiet street ahead. And something about it feels different now, not because the world has changed, but because he has, even if only slightly. And he takes a step back, then forward again, testing his balance, his control, and Ranger mirrors each movement without hesitation, and the man's eyes narrow just a fraction, focus sharpening, and he nods again, more firmly this time, and he speaks once more, "Sit." And Ranger responds immediately, lowering himself smoothly onto the pavement beside him, posture straight, attentive, and the man watches this, his expression steady, absorbing it, understanding it, and his breath deepens again, and for a brief moment, something aligns inside him, something that feels like order, like structure, like a life that once made sense, and he kneels down slowly in front of Ranger, his movements controlled, deliberate, and he places his hand gently against the dog's chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath, and he holds it there, not just to reassure the dog, but to ground himself, to confirm that this is real, that this connection exists, and his voice comes again, softer now, almost certain. "You did not forget me," he says, and Ranger's eyes remain fixed on him, calm, unwavering, and the man exhales slowly, a quiet breath that carries something heavier, something closer to truth, and he nods once more, not to the dog this time, but to himself, as if accepting something that no longer feels distant, and when he stands again, his movements are steadier, more certain, and he looks down the road once more, then back at Ranger, and without hesitation, he speaks again, "Come on." And this time the words carry direction, purpose, and Ranger rises instantly, stepping back into position at his side, and together, they move forward again, not just walking now, but going somewhere, even if the destination has not yet been named. They move with more certainty now, the rhythm no longer tentative, but forming something steady, something deliberate, and the man feels it in his stride, in the way his feet meet the pavement with quiet purpose instead of aimless drift, and Ranger remains exactly where he should be, aligned at his side, his presence constant like a compass that does not waver. And the street stretches ahead into a slightly brighter patch where a service station sign glows faintly in the distance, its soft white light cutting through the darkness like a quiet invitation, and the man's gaze settles on it without fully knowing why, only that it feels like a direction, and for the first time in what feels like years, direction matters, and he exhales slowly, shoulders easing as he continues forward, and something inside him begins to settle into place, not fully, not completely, but enough to feel the difference, enough to notice that he is no longer just surviving the night. He is moving through it, and Ranger matches every step, his breathing steady, his focus unwavering, and the man glances down again, watching the dog's movement with a kind of quiet appreciation, as if seeing not just what Ranger is doing, but what he has always done, what he has always been, and it stirs something deeper, something that feels like trust, something that feels earned rather than given, and he nods faintly to himself, as though acknowledging that this is not chance, this is not coincidence, this is something that has endured beyond everything else. and they reach the edge of the brighter light. The ground shifting from cracked pavement to smoother concrete near the station's forecourt, and the air carries a faint scent of fuel and warm metal, a contrast to the damp coolness of the street behind them. And the man slows slightly as they step into the light, his eyes adjusting, his posture straightening just a little more as visibility sharpens, and Ranger remains beside him, calm and composed, his ears flicking once at the change in environment, but his focus never breaking, and the man pauses just inside the light, taking it in, the quiet hum of the station, the soft buzz of fluorescent tubes overhead, the distant clink of something metallic shifting in the night breeze, and he breathes in deeply. The air different here, sharper, more defined, and it grounds him in a way he did not expect, and he glances toward the building, dark windows reflecting the light back in dull rectangles. And then his gaze drifts downward again, catching his reflection faintly in the glass of a vending machine near the wall, and he steps closer, just a fraction, enough to see more clearly, and what looks back at him is not entirely unfamiliar anymore, not entirely lost, the posture straighter, the eyes more focused, the presence more anchored, and beside him, Ranger stands as he always has, steady, unwavering, and the man studies that reflection for a moment, longer than before, and something about it feels different. Not perfect, not whole, but closer, and he exhales slowly, a quiet breath that carries something like acceptance. And then he reaches into his pocket again, pulling out what little he has, the same worn paper, the same small piece of bread, and he looks at it briefly before glancing down at Ranger, and his expression softens, and he crouches slightly, breaking the bread once more, but this time the motion is not absent, not automatic, it is intentional. And he holds the piece out in his hand instead of tossing it, offering it directly, and Ranger looks at it, then at the man, and after a brief pause, he accepts it gently, careful, controlled, and the man watches this, a faint smile touching his lips, subtle but real, and he nods once, a quiet gesture of approval. That feels instinctive, and he murmurs softly, "Good boy." The words carrying warmth now, not just habit, and Ranger's tail moves in response. A quiet rhythm that feels almost like reassurance, and the man straightens again, his hand resting briefly on Ranger's head before falling back to his side. And he looks around once more, taking in the space with clearer eyes, the edges sharper, the world more defined. And he realizes something then, not in words, not fully, but in feeling, that he is no longer just being carried by the night. He is choosing where to go, even if the choice is small. Even if it is only to stand here for a moment longer, and he nods again, more firmly this time, and his voice comes quietly but with intent. "Come on, Ranger." And the name flows more easily now, more naturally, and Ranger responds instantly, stepping back into position at his side, and together they turn slightly, angling toward the far end of the forecourt where the light fades back into the darker stretch of road beyond. And as they move, the man's stride remains steady, his posture grounded, and the connection between them feels stronger, not just in presence, but in purpose, and the night continues to stretch ahead, but it no longer feels endless. It feels like something they can move through, together, one step at a time. They step out of the station's light and back into the darker stretch of road, and for a moment the contrast feels sharper than before, the night closing in around them again. But this time it does not feel as heavy. It does not press down the same way it once did, because something inside the man has changed, something small but steady, and he carries it with him as he walks, his pace even, his posture aligned, and Ranger remains at his side, perfectly in step, his presence constant, unwavering, like a quiet promise that has already been kept, and the road ahead curves gently to the left, disappearing behind a row of low trees that sway softly in the breeze, their leaves whispering against each other with a sound that feels almost like conversation, and the man listens to it as they approach, not consciously, not deliberately, but with a kind of quiet awareness that has begun to return to him, and his breathing stays steady, each inhale deeper, each exhale more controlled, and he glances down at Ranger again, just briefly, and there is something different in that glance now, something more certain, something that no longer questions whether the dog belongs there, but accepts that he does, and he nods faintly to himself as they continue, and the ground beneath their feet shifts slightly, the smooth concrete giving way to a more uneven stretch of bitumen, small cracks and patches catching the light in dull reflections, and the man adjusts his stride without thinking, his steps adapting naturally. And Ranger mirrors the adjustment perfectly, his gait fluid, controlled, and the man notices it again, the precision, the quiet discipline, and it draws another thread loose inside him, something stronger this time, something that feels less like a fragment and more like a connection. And his brow tightens slightly as he focuses on it, not forcing it, not chasing it, but allowing it to surface at its own pace. And his voice comes again, low and steady. Easy, he says, not as a command, but as a reassurance. And Ranger's ears flick in response, his posture remaining calm, grounded, and the man exhales softly, a faint hint of something like a smile touching his expression, and they continue around the bend, the trees closing in slightly on either side, creating a narrower path where the streetlight ahead casts longer shadows across the road, and the man's gaze lifts toward it, following the light as it stretches out before them. And something about it feels like a marker, like a point to reach, and he keeps walking, one step, then another, his movements steady, deliberate, and Ranger stays beside him, matching every shift, every adjustment, as though the two of them are moving within the same rhythm, the same pattern. And as they pass under the next streetlight, the man slows slightly, his eyes narrowing as something catches his attention, a small sign mounted on a pole near the edge of the road, its paint worn but still legible, and he steps closer, his gaze fixing on the words as he reads them, and for a moment his expression tightens, not in confusion, but in recognition, faint and fragile, and he reaches out, his fingers brushing lightly against the metal surface as if grounding himself in the reality of it. And the name of the street lingers in his mind, not fully clear, not fully understood, but not entirely unfamiliar either. And he exhales slowly, his breath steadying as he processes it, and Ranger remains beside him, still and patient, his presence unchanged, and the man nods faintly, stepping back from the sign, his gaze drifting forward again, and something inside him shifts once more, not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to feel, enough to notice, and he turns slightly, his eyes scanning the path ahead, and then he looks down at Ranger again, his voice quieter now, but more certain. "We have been here before," he says, the words forming slowly, as if testing themselves, and Ranger's gaze remains steady, unwavering. And the man exhales again, a deeper breath this time, and he nods. Once more firmly, as if accepting the thought, and he steps forward again, resuming their pace. And the road continues to stretch ahead, the trees thinning out slightly as the next set of houses comes into view, their windows dark, their shapes silent against the night, and the man's posture remains steady, his stride even, and there is a quiet sense of direction in his movement now, not fully formed, not fully understood, but present, and he follows it without hesitation, allowing it to guide him forward. And Ranger stays at his side, his presence constant, grounding, and as they move past the first house, the man's gaze lingers on it briefly, his eyes scanning the outline of the front yard, the fence, the path leading to the door, and something about it feels familiar, not in detail, not in clarity, but in feeling, and he slows slightly, his steps becoming more measured as he takes it in, and his breath deepens again. And for a moment he simply stands there, looking, not searching, not forcing, just allowing whatever comes to come, and Ranger remains beside him, still and steady, and the night settles around them once more, quieter now, softer, and the man's shoulders ease. Just a little more, and when he finally takes another step forward, it is not out of uncertainty, not out of habit, but out of something closer to intent, something that feels like it is leading him somewhere he has been before, somewhere that matters, even if he does not yet know why, and he follows it, one step at a time, with Ranger beside him, exactly where he belongs. The houses grow closer now, each one quiet and still, their outlines softened by the dim glow of porch lights left on through the night, and the man slows again, not out of uncertainty this time, but out of something else, something heavier, something pulling at him from beneath the surface, and his gaze drifts from one home to the next, lingering on small details he cannot yet explain, the shape of a fence, the curve of a driveway, the way a letterbox leans slightly to one side as if it has weathered years of the same wind, and each detail seems to echo faintly inside him, not clear enough to form a memory, but strong enough to feel. And he exhales slowly, his breath steady but deeper now, as though he is preparing himself for something he cannot yet see. And Ranger remains beside him, perfectly aligned, his presence unwavering, his attention fixed not on the houses, not on the street, but on the man. As if reading the subtle shifts in his movement, the quiet changes in his breathing, and they continue forward, step by step, until the man's pace slows to nearly nothing, his boots coming to rest just outside a narrow front yard where the grass has grown uneven and the path leading to the door is cracked in places. And he stands there, still, his eyes fixed on the house before him, and something inside him tightens, not painfully, but with weight, with meaning, and his hand lifts slightly, hovering in the air as if reaching for something invisible, and his fingers tremble, just enough to notice, and Ranger shifts closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against the man's leg, grounding him without breaking the silence. And the man swallows, his throat tight, and his eyes move slowly across the front of the house, the faded paint, the small window near the door, the curtain drawn halfway across it. And the longer he looks, the more something stirs, deeper now, not just fragments, not just feelings, but pieces beginning to connect, and his breath catches, sharper this time, and he takes a small step forward, then another, his movements cautious but driven, as if something inside him is guiding him closer, and Ranger follows without hesitation, his steps matching perfectly, and they reach the edge of the yard, the boundary marked by a low fence that has seen better days, and the man stops. Again, his gaze fixed on the front door, and for a moment he simply stands there, the night quiet around him, the air still, and then his voice comes, barely above a whisper. "I have been here," he says, not as a question, not as doubt, but as something closer to truth, and the words linger, heavy and real, and Ranger remains beside him, still and steady, and the man exhales slowly, his chest rising and falling with a deeper rhythm, and his hand drops to his side, then lifts again, this time, more certain, reaching toward the gate, and his fingers brush against the metal, the surface cool beneath his touch, and something about that contact sends a quiet ripple through him, as if the place itself holds something he has forgotten, and he pushes the gate gently, the hinge creaking softly as it opens, and the sound feels louder than it should, echoing faintly in the stillness, and he steps through, one foot, then the other, his movements slow but deliberate, and Ranger follows. Immediately, staying close, his presence constant, and they move along the cracked path toward the door, each step carrying more weight than the last, and the man's breathing deepens again, his chest tightening slightly as he approaches, and when he reaches the front step, he stops, his hand hovering near the door as if unsure whether to touch it, whether to cross whatever line this moment represents, and his eyes close briefly, just for a second, and in that second something shifts, something aligns, not fully, not completely, but enough to feel, enough to know that this place matters, that it is not random, not just another house in a quiet street, and his eyes open again, and this time there is less hesitation in them, less uncertainty, and he raises his hand, placing it gently against the door, his palm flat against the wood, and he stands there, feeling it, grounding himself in its presence, and Ranger steps closer, his head brushing lightly against the man's side, and the contact steadies him, and the man exhales slowly, his breath carrying a quiet resolve, and then, without overthinking, without stepping back, he taps lightly on the door, the sound soft but clear, and the night seems to hold its breath around them, and for a moment nothing happens, and the man stands there, waiting, not impatient, not uncertain, just present, and Ranger remains beside him, calm and unwavering. And then, faintly, from within the house, there is a sound, small and distant, the shift of something moving, and the man's eyes lift slightly, his focus sharpening, and his breath steadies, and he does not move, does not retreat. He simply waits, because whatever comes next, he is no longer alone to face it. The sound inside the house grows clearer, not loud, not sudden, but unmistakable, the soft shift of footsteps across a wooden floor, measured and unhurried. and the man stands still at the door, his hand lowering slowly to his side as he listens, his breathing steady but deeper now, as if each inhale carries weight, carries expectation, and Ranger remains pressed lightly against him, his presence calm, grounded, his ears angled forward just enough to catch the same sound, and the night seems to narrow again, focusing everything into this one moment, this one threshold, and then the faint click of a latch breaks the silence, followed by the slow turn of a handle, and the door opens just a few centimeters at first, cautious, uncertain, and a sliver of warm light spills out into the cool night air, brushing softly across the man's face, across Ranger's fur, and for a second no one speaks. The space between inside and outside held in quiet suspension, and then the door opens a little wider, revealing the figure of an older man standing just inside, his posture slightly bent with age but steady, his hand still resting on the door as if unsure whether to open it further or close it. Again, and his eyes settle on the man outside, scanning slowly, carefully, taking in the worn clothes, the unshaven face, the quiet stillness, and there is no immediate recognition in his expression, only caution, only the guarded look of someone who has learned to expect little at this hour, and the man outside does not speak right away. He simply stands there, his gaze steady but not demanding, his shoulders relaxed but grounded, and something about the way he holds himself feels different. Now, less like someone lost, more like someone searching, and Ranger shifts slightly beside him, stepping just enough into the light for the older man to see him clearly. And that is when everything changes, because the moment the older man's eyes fall on the dog, something flickers across his face, not sudden, not dramatic, but unmistakable, a soft widening of the eyes, a subtle intake of breath, as if something long buried has just been uncovered, and he leans forward just a fraction, his gaze sharpening, and his voice comes, low and uncertain. "Ranger," he says, the name slipping out with a mixture of disbelief and recognition, and Ranger's ears lift immediately, his body shifting forward a step, not leaving the man's side, but acknowledging the call, and the older man's breath catches again, this time stronger, and his eyes move quickly from the dog to the man standing beside him, studying his face more closely now, searching, and the silence stretches for a moment longer, thick with something unspoken, and then the man outside swallows, his throat tightening slightly, and his voice comes, quiet but steady. I know this place," he says, the words forming slowly, carefully, as if each one must be placed with intention, and the older man's expression shifts again, the caution still there, but something else now, something softer, something that feels like recognition trying to surface, and he steps back slightly, opening the door a little wider, the warm light spilling further out, illuminating more of the space between them, and he studies the man again, longer this time, taking in the posture, the eyes, the subtle alignment that was not there before, and his voice comes again, quieter now, almost testing. "Ethan," he says, the name spoken not as certainty, but as a question he is almost afraid to answer, and the sound of it hangs in the air, heavy and real, and the man outside freezes, his breath catching sharply, not from confusion this time, but from recognition, because this word, this name, reaches deeper than anything else has, and his eyes close briefly, just for a second, and when they open again, something has shifted, something clearer, something more anchored, and he nods, slowly, as if accepting it, as if claiming it, and his voice comes, steadier now. "Ethan," he repeats, not as a question, but as a quiet confirmation, and the older man exhales deeply, a breath that seems to carry years within it, and his shoulders ease, the tension slipping away just enough to reveal something else beneath, something closer to relief, and he opens the door fully now, stepping aside without hesitation, and his voice softens. "Come in," he says, simple and unforced, and Ethan stands there for a moment longer, just a moment, as if taking it all in, the light, the space, the invitation, and then he glances down at Ranger, his hand resting briefly on the dog's